the blob brush. So shortcut is Shift and B. Here it is over here, Shift and B, blob brush. And I do really want to sort of emphasize that they are quite different brushes. I'm going to Command A or Control A, select or delete. And let's grab the blob brush. Now whatever brush I've got selected here, spiky, doesn't really matter. It's just going to come out as a stock standard shape. So not really that exciting at the moment, but let's see what the difference is. I'm going to go B for brush now, switch back to a regular brush, and let's just click on a basic brush here as well, and let's draw that, and let's select it because it will go default back to the last brush. Well, let's just get maybe a round brush so it looks the similar. Alright, so two brushes here, brush strokes here. Top one is the blob brush, bottom one is just a standard round brush. The big difference is that the standard brush is going to apply a path with a stroke to it. So there's our stroke, which we can adjust the size to of and all the rest of it. When we select on the blob brush, you'll notice that the stroke is actually non-existent. And the reason for that is what the blob brush actually does is it creates a shape. So it may look like you're creating a brush stroke, but you're actually creating a physical shape based on kind of a brush in the sense. So it does have some really cool options in that sense, and you'll see that in a moment. It doesn't quite have the options in the sense of changing the width, but we do have some other options in there where we can actually physically grab a bunch of vertices, and we can start moving that around. You can do some really weird and wonderful stuff with it. But the real exciting thing is, I'm going to delete those again, is let's go Shift B, let's set that blob brush, is we still do have some options in here. Double click and we've got keep selected, merge only with selection. We've got our fidelity options as we do, and we've also got our size options, and I'm going to set mine to pressure and allow for some variation in that sizes as well. Let's try that for now and see how it looks. And if I go really soft, I'm going to get a nice soft brush, small brush, and then as I press harder it's going to get larger. So do experiment, see if you can find something that works for you. If it's not working, double click, let's play around with the variation. I'm going to drop the size down just a smidge. I'll just use the arrow keys for that. Let's try that. And that kind of works. So figure out what you're going to use it for. And what the blob brush actually does is, as you can see, as I start drawing over these things and colouring in and doing whatever, don't forget to use those square brackets, is it'll actually start building a physical shape. So whereas the previous one is, we're relying on lines and fills, this is creating a fill to it, but what it's really doing is building this as an actual entity. So, wherever we're going with that. And as I move that around, that is just a solid shape with an outline. I can still add a stroke to this. So there's my stroke, and I can increase the size of that. I've got all my options. I'm going to actually turn off my brush panel there because it doesn't really matter. Of my corners, and whether or not I have the stroke inside or outside or centralized, the width of it, all that kind of fun stuff there. But that's kind of it. Where I want to kind of suggest that this is a really good brush for actually creating brush strokes for an image as well is the fact that you can do a really accurate erasing of it. So let's check out the difference again. B for brush. Let's draw a brush. Well, for some reason we've defaulted back to this one. Let's grab that and let's switch that back to, let's just do a round brush for that. Let's change the stroke to black with playing around, and let's make something a little bit more interesting. Alright, let's call that whatever it is, and let's go back to our blob brush, and I'm going to create something fairly similar like so. Alright, so above is the brush tool, the other one is the blob brush tool, and I'm going to grab my eraser. The shortcut is Shift and E, there it is, eraser tool, and on my blob brush, what will actually happen if I start erasing, it's going to treat this like a shape. So I can actually start carving into this potentially. So I can get maybe carve in a nice point there, carve in a point there, and this is going to allow me to do some really interesting stuff as far as carving in my shape. And the brush that I use for my eraser is going to help me define that shape a little bit. So it does have a lot of control where the other one doesn't. So now I'm going to select my standard brush. There is that stroke on top of a path, and I'm going to go Shift E for eraser, sorry. And as I cut that off, what it's going to do is it's going to kind of destroy any of the path, and it's going to end off depending on what sort of brush stroke it is. If I cut it through the middle, it's going to turn it into individual paths. So it will work quite differently between basically what's an object created by the blob brush and another one created by a standard brush. So with all this in mind, it's up to you how you really want to create your line work. The pencil tool is going to have some really interesting, let's make sure we get all this set back for the pencil tool. I'm going to give a stroke and no fill, like so. Sorry, I still had that one selected, and then we can jump in there with the stroke options and change that up a little bit, get something that's going to work. And then using that pencil tool, we can create some really nice simple curves. We can also have it so it closes off a shape as well, which could be useful. We can add a fill color to it, all that kind of stuff. Whereas your brush tool now has better options in the sense of if you want to use some of those really cool different styles of brushes, whether they be pattern or calligraphic. So let's jump into brushes. There it is there, and you've got all those options in there for your brushes as well, and you could set up the pressure sensitivity. The other one, as I said just then, is the blob brush, which allows you to physically build shapes. So that could be really interesting. And I've currently got mine keep selected. If you turn that off, then you can go through and that will create a bunch of different shapes, and if they happen to cross over, it will create a single shape. So a lot of options in there. In a moment, I'm just going to run through and show you a technique for creating an image using the brush tool, creating some line work, and then adding some blocked in color underneath, just to give you a quick idea on how to do that. But there it is. It's a quick intro into the three different types of brushes, or the three simplest types of brushes for freehand in Adobe Illustrator.